Welcome to the Hong Kong On Screen podcast, brought to you by Hong Kong On Screen, a Los Angeles-based non-profit organization promoting films and culture of Hong Kong.
Hello, welcome back to the Hong Kong On Screen podcast. For today's episode, we once again have the director of the San Diego Asian Film Festival with us, Mr. Brian Hu. So, hi Brian. To audiences who are meeting you for the first time, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Brian Hu. I am the artistic director of the San Diego Asian Film Festival. I'm also a curator for various other programs, but I'm also an associate professor at San Diego State University in the program in television, film, and new media. And your question was about how I got to this point?
Not yet. But
okay, right.
Before that, I have a question. Do you teach specifically like East Asian cinema, or yeah?
Yeah, I teach classes in international cinema, in independent cinema. I end up teaching some Chinese cinema topics and Asian cinema topics in like directors classes. So I just did a class on Wong Kar-wai. Last year I taught a class on Ang Lee and Spike Lee. I talked about the two Lees together. And then next semester I'm teaching on Ozu. So not a class specifically on Asian cinemas, although I've taught classes like that before. I kind of like surprising students when they take non-Asian classes and they end up with Asian topics.
So talk to us a little more about the San Diego Asian Film Festival. Like, what is it and how long has it been going? And yeah, around when does it happen?
Yes, the San Diego Asian Film Festival has been around since 2000. So this is our 24th annual festival. And I say annual very proudly because there was, of course, the pandemic year when we wondered if we were going to have a festival. And we did. Our festival takes place every fall. It's now in early November.
Great. And I assume the focus is usually on Asian cinema, as the name suggests.
Yeah, although it's a tricky question, actually. Our festival, like many other Asian-themed festivals in North America, is not just interested in films from Asia, but also Asian American works.
Okay.
And I would say about a third of our films are Asian American, and then about 2/3 are from Asia.
Cool. So let's jump right into my first question, which is, I'm a filmmaker myself as well, and I always think there's this kind of mystery surrounding the film festival process. So, well, actually, before I get to that, I just have a general question about how is the festival doing? Like, is COVID, like, how is the impact of COVID? Is attendance and, like, the number of screenings back to pre-pandemic levels? Or are you still kind of recovering?
Yeah, this year is the year where, in terms of the numbers, it feels like it is as much of a festival as it had been pre-pandemic. Mm-hmm. We're not quite there yet in terms of the amount of the amount and scale of our parties, but in terms of filmmakers, a lot of filmmakers have already told us that they're coming, and it feels back to pre-pandemic levels.
Yeah, I think from an audience perspective, most of us as an audience are just familiar with the screenings part of festivals, but like, what else happens during SDAFF that we should know about?
Yeah, I mean, we have filmmaker activities, or filmmaker brunch, for instance. We also have receptions, Q&As. It's not just watching a movie. It's the many ways in which we're celebrating the existence of these movies, celebrating the filmmakers who make them possible, and then also celebrating the audiences who kind of venture beyond the mainstream.
Cool. Okay, so now let me actually get to the mystery of the film festival process, which is, I don't know. So I know some of this is usually like state secrets that you can't divulge too much, but like, for example, how many films did you receive this year, and then how many ended up making the cut, if that's something you can disclose?
So first of all, like it's so meaningful to me that you acknowledge straight up that filmmakers find this a very mystifying process, because I think sometimes film festivals intentionally they try to remain ambiguous. Mm-hmm. so that they're not really called out on it. I'm like, wait, how come I didn't get in? We try to be as transparent as possible. So I'll just say it. We get about 400 or 500 submissions every year, most of which are short films, and our festival this year has about 160 films. Now, this is a little bit of a tricky math because it's not necessarily that we picked 160 films from that pool. A lot of the films that we ended up playing are ones that were not submitted that we're actually scouting out. So in terms of the actual percentage of films that gets into our festival, it's about 15%.
Okay.
Like through the years, and that's remained fairly consistent. Although this year was especially competitive. Maybe it was a little less than 15% this year.
I think from what I know, 15% is actually pretty high. At least I know some of the big festivals are in the decimal points. So I think, yeah, that's great. I think that's very encouraging for a lot of like aspiring or up and rising filmmakers to hear. And then I think another question I have is like, what is the judging process like? How many screeners are involved? Who are these screeners who are judging the films? And then like, what is the criteria involved in selecting a film?
Yeah, it's a fun batch of not random people, but like people from different walks of life. We have artists, we have filmmakers, we have activists, we have people who your former interns and who decided to keep sticking around, and myself as an academic. And so everyone is bringing with them different priorities, different tastes, and as we all immediately recognize, there is a bit of randomness to it because you're watching a film. Sometimes your reaction to a film is directly related to your reaction to the previous movie that you just watched. And so these films come in, and we recognize that there's a bit of randomness to it. So every film is watched by multiple people in order to hopefully create some sense of, all right, well, where do we stand on this as a group? And then we actually have regular meetings in which we talk about the films that we've seen. And then from there, even if we liked a lot of films, and we like a lot of movies, then it becomes the question of, especially for short films, is there a place for this movie in our festival? And then we make really tough decisions like a movie that's 35 minutes versus 3 movies that are 12 minutes long. Like, are we gonna like how are we gonna what's our priority here? Like, how much do we love this 35-minute movie? And so questions like that. Questions of what's the most appropriate program that we're putting these short films together in, and then those conversations will continue to inform what ends up going in.
So obviously you're the artistic director, and then we'll get to how you got there in a second, but like I assume you don't watch every submission. So how do the submissions trickle down to your final position?
Yeah, so the way we do things now is I've relinquished the short films. Or another way of putting it, for the short films, I am just like any other programmer. Like, I will watch a few shorts here and there and then give my feedback. But otherwise, we have a shorts team that really takes charge on it. They are recruiting, they're doing research, they're watching everything, they're diligently taking notes. I really get involved in the sense that they may ask questions about the larger program of the entire film festival. How many slots do we have? Are there certain themes that we're excited about? And sometimes I recommend short films for them to consider. But otherwise, I don't have as much of a hands-on role with the shorts. But for the features, it's pretty much me. I watch a lot of features. Including the submissions. I mean, I do have some of our programmers and some of our programming interns who help me kind of give me notes on feature films that have been submitted to us. But otherwise, I'm very, very actively recruiting features from year round and from around the world.
Can you give us like some numbers during crunch time? Are you doing like 3 movies a day for 30 days a month or something?
That's not unusual. It's become a little harder now that I have a baby, and so I have to be a little more judicious about do I really want to? Do I really think I'm gonna like this movie? And I've been doing this long enough that I kind of know if this is gonna fly. But then I'm such a completist that it's like, oh well, if it played this film festival, I should give it a shot, right? Like if it was at the Taipei Film Festival, I should probably watch it, right? And then sometimes I pay for.
Okay, you
being a
can
completist.
answer this diplomatically, but do you or your team watch every movie in full, or like is it usual to just be like 10 minutes in, this is crap? Yeah.
Good question. I have my own policy, and I sort of encourage everybody to have their own policy. My own policy is I want to know how every movie ends. I want to know. So I will say, like, I will sit through everything. But if a movie doesn't really grip me, I may. My phone comes out sometimes, so, like in the middle of a movie. But I will watch to the end because I want to know what this filmmaker is doing. For our programmers who've been doing this for a very long time, I kind of trust their instincts. Any programmer who is kind of new to it, I think it's important that they sit with all the films and understand the breadth of what is possible out there before they feel like they're kind of above the process and can just skip a film or something.
Yeah. So I'm curious about like what the judging criteria is like. It is merely based on quality or like production value, or like this kind of, because it's an Asian film festival where there's like a topic of interest, so it's like the engagement with the topic come into play as well.
Yeah, the engagement with Asianness and its kind of complications and heterogeneity is way more interesting to me than things like craft or production value. And I think this is something that is we talk about as a group all the time as a programming team. So this is for shorts as well. I mean, I think especially for shorts, there's a openness to all kinds of scrappiness, all kinds of like, this is a brand new filmmaker who's really up to something strange, or that is very under-resourced, but that has interesting ideas. I think our festival in particular, especially for shorts, kind of veers in that direction. But otherwise, our mission and the reason we exist has something to do with the fact that Asian cinema is undershown in the United States, not shown at all, or misinterpreted. And so we exist in order to correct that. And part of that correction is, well, if Asian cinema, if Asian voices, if Asian representations have been badly presented, how are we going to do it better? And so part of that is like, what are the conversations we want to have around these movies? Sometimes literally, if a filmmaker is here, sometimes through our introductions to the films, to the program notes that we write, and we write all original program notes at our film festival. We think about those things. Yeah, what is the conversation that we hope to have with each film? And so that becomes a criteria that we have, as well as things like, is this a filmmaker who we see maybe this film is not quite there yet, but we know there's something there. We sort of want to invest in this voice, and especially for short films, that comes into play as well.
I'm curious because of the I assume most of the films are about Asianness, as you put it, even though it's not a monolith. Is the audience that usually comes out usually Asian, or do you get like people from all kind of demographics?
Yeah, in San Diego is not as Asian as some other cities in the United States, and people are often surprised that we have the second biggest Asian film festival in the country. And so our audience is, I would say, it's like half of Asian descent, and amongst them, it varies quite a bit in terms of people who are recent immigrants, people who are international students who happen to be here in town, or people who have very little connection with Asia itself, and it's just they're here for other reasons. Who maybe don't know the languages, don't know the cultures as well. We have people who are here because they're adoptees from Asia, and that's really they find that this is the place where they can find something about identity that they haven't been able to have in other areas of their lives. So yeah, about half Asian, but even within that half, it's very varied in terms of why people are here.
And I guess now I have a question, again, another question for filmmakers, which is about premiere status. So I think it's kind of a little strange to me that the San Diego Asian Film Festival, which I assume is San Diego's second or third biggest festival, happens at a very similar time to the San Diego International Film Festival. So I'm wondering if there's like a lot of infighting about the premieres and, you know, trying to compete for films, or am I just imagining this in my head?
There's less than you would imagine. So first of all, for short films, we actually don't have strict premiere requirements. So I think we frequently play short films that have played other film festivals here in San Diego. In that case, it's more important that it's not like readily available on YouTube or something like that. That to us is more something we're concerned with. With features, we do require that these films have not played other festivals in San Diego. The San Diego International Film Festival is, I mean, they only have a certain number of slots, and they only have a certain number of slots that are dedicated to Asia, and their tastes are a little bit different than ours anyways. And so we don't end up finding that we are competing for the same movies very often. Maybe like once every couple of years, maybe, or something. Yeah.
That's good to know. Yeah. I think for filmmakers who are applying. So before I forget, let's get back to how you got to become artistic director, because for audiences who can't see Brian, you actually look quite young to me. So I'm very curious to know about your ascent, your career path.
Well, so maybe I'll give you some clues about how long I've been doing this. But I was a graduate student in the mid 2000s, and so during that time I was actually at UCLA, and I was studying film and media studies, and but my background was in film criticism, and that was what was kind of. That was what in some ways like kept me sane during grad school, is that like by day I am like reading Foucault or something and writing seminar papers, and then by night I'm like interviewing Zhang Yimou and like Stephen Chow when he came to LA, and also I was going to Asian American film festivals, and I was writing about them. I was writing reviews. I was kind of talking about the state of the field. And that was really exciting to me. However, I found that like there were very few people writing about Asian American cinema from a critical perspective. Most of that kind of journalism was like hey, I'm so glad we made these movies. Like, isn't it so good to be represented on screen? Whereas I was one thinking like, oh, what does it say in terms of authorship and genre and like the kind of things that like film critics and scholars care about. And so when there was an opening at the San Diego Asian Film Festival, I think I was naturally somebody who they were interested in because I was covering the festival as a journalist. I was familiar with a lot of the filmmakers, and I was thinking about it critically, and not just in terms of, because they needed somebody who's not just going to let all movies in, obviously, right? Like and they wanted somebody who could like think seriously about what do we mean by criteria and what do we mean by representation beyond just celebration, but about like what are the stakes here? So that's how I got into it, and I got this job at the San Diego Asian Film Festival in 2011.
And then did you start as a regular programmer, or how did you become artistic director?
Yeah, at that point, their previous artistic director was already, like, she had announced that she was going to leave, and so the first year I was there as the associate artistic director, and I was just there to shadow her. Because as it turns out, this job isn't just about picking your favorite movies. You're leading a team, you're interacting with filmmakers, and especially with the features, so much of it is you are negotiating. like you're dealing with premiere statuses, you're dealing with these kinds of things, filmmaker travel, and so learning all of that. I got to spend a year doing that, and then the year after that, I was fully the artistic director.
Okay, great. So that leads me well to my next question, which is, you already kind of said, a lot of the features are solicited or negotiated with from distributors. So I'm wondering, can you give us like a ratio, like a split between submissions and solicited films, and then what is the relationship between distributors and your festival like?
Yeah. I mean, I could just pull up my looking at our schedule right here. I mean, most of the Asian American films, even the features, came through the open call. Although some of them are ones where they were thinking about submitting anyways, and I just sort of encouraged them to submit. But there are films from overseas that were blind submissions. I didn't know they were coming in. In many cases, I didn't even know these films were in the works. And I accepted them thinking that, I mean, this is very, like, honestly few, right? Like maybe like 3 or 4 a year features that we accepted blindly from Asia. And I'm accepting them, obviously. Sometimes thinking, like, I don't even know what your world premiere is going to be. Sometimes they end up premiering, say, at Busan, Busan International Film Festival, which is a month or two before our festival, and therefore they have a world premiere elsewhere, and then they come to us for the U.S. premiere or North American premiere. Sometimes we accept films randomly, and they tell us, "Thank you, you're the world premiere," and that's also very exciting too. And in those cases, like, we feel we're indebted to these filmmakers. Like, you've handed us this opportunity to become the platform for the existence of your movie, and we really want to make sure that those filmmakers feel taken care of, that there's an audience for their film, and that we're working with the press to give them coverage. So for features from Asia, it's a small proportion. Like, we're talking like 5% or something that came in through the open call. But for Asian American features, it's much, much higher. Most of the features were submitted to us.
I think naturally the exposure of festivals like SDAFF is much higher in the American filmmaking community versus Asia.
Yeah, and also just the fall festival calendar is so complicated in Asia because you have Busan, you have Tokyo, you have Golden Horse, you have Singapore, and they're all kind of right next to each other. And I think a lot of filmmakers are like, I'm not quite sure where San Diego falls in all of this, because they're dealing.
Have you ever considered moving to another date?
Well, we haven't considered changing these days, but what we did instead was we just added a second festival. So we actually have another festival in April. We called it our spring showcase, and so that festival allows us to pick up a lot of the films that premiered at Busan and the fall festivals.
Okay, and I'm wondering, like, when you want a film from a distributor, and let's say it's a big one, like, how do you negotiate? How do you get it in your hands?
As the way the way thing goes is, who needs who more, right? Like, do we need their movie more than they need to play our festival? And it comes down to that. Some filmmakers or some distributors are very, like, they know that we provide them a certain kind of service because we give them visibility, we give them press, we give them validation, and then they can brand their film with our laurels, and that can help them get into other festivals and help them find audiences in different kinds of markets and sell the rights to other territories. Sometimes they look at us and are like, I'm Hirokazu Koreeda. You need me more than I need you. And they're correct. And if they want to charge us to play their movie, like, here's your money. Like, you're you raise our you bring so much to our festival, and in a way that, like, we and also just they at some point they kind of know. Some of them know me and they know my tastes are. Like the distributor for Hong Sang-soo's films, like, they know there's a guy in San Diego who will play Hong Sang-soo movies every single year. And so I do have these relationships with some distributors for sure. And in many ways it's helped us get films because they know that we will do their films right. Like, we are not the kind of festival that's just like, oh, your film played Cannes? Yeah, we're interested in it. No, we know who the directors are. We've seen their previous films. We've sort of studied this national cinema. We know what the trends are. And And then, so when we write the program notes, when we do a Q&A, when we introduce the film to an audience, we're going to do it from the perspective of, we are also creating value for this movie. We're not just, otherwise, we're just like AMC cinemas or any other theater that's just pressing play on a movie. We're more than that. And some distributors recognize that.
I guess that kind of brings me to the question of how do you, actually thematically program and curate? Like, I know the program obviously has strands, like different strands, and do these themes change every year, or are they the same every year? And then like, how do you fit these films into these boxes?
Yeah, I think we've settled on these categories or sections that we are pretty happy with, and that we feel like covers a pretty good cross section of what excites us about Asian cinema. And so for listeners who don't know, we have a section on called Asian American Panorama. We have a section called Asia Pop, which, many festivals in the West are not interested in mainstream films from Asia, like the studio films and box office hits and movies that are like committed to genres. And so, but we know that how important that is in the Asian markets, and also, like Hong Kong cinema in particular, right? Like it thrives in genre. And so we know that not having a section dedicated to that is also like missing out on a lot of what's exciting about films from Asia. We have a section called Masters, which is the auteur films, because there are people who that's what they go to film festivals for. We have a section called Unknown Pleasures, which is named after the Jiazhangke film, but that's like for kind of new voices or unusual voices. And our most recent section is called Classics Restored, which is especially the availability now of new 2K and 4K restorations that are available digitally. We'll play those too. But in terms of, and each of those sections kind of creates their own criteria and creates for me a sense of like, how do I know a section is complete? Like for instance, with masters, this idea of a master and an auteur is so loaded, right? It's so like politically loaded and culturally sensitive. Many of the problems we have with canonization have to do with this obsession with masters. And so we know that, all right, this section cannot just be a bunch of Chinese, Japanese, and Korean men. Because that's what the West tends to think of who the masters from Asia are. So part of it is, how do we define mastery in unexpected ways? Like for instance, this year we're playing a new film by the Chinese director Liu Jiaying, who only has 2 features. This is her 3rd feature. But for her fans, like this is a moment, like we've been waiting because she is an absolute master and she hasn't made a movie in over a decade. And so let's just name it. Like if nobody else is calling her a master in Western film festivals, we want to be the one to play a role in doing so. So these are the conversations that I have in terms of how I use these sections in order to decide what goes in and what doesn't get in.
So it sounds like the sections have been set in stone for like at least a couple of years, maybe 10 years or so.
Yeah, except for the restorations one, all of those have been around for about a decade now.
Okay.
And part of it there was a training process because our audiences maybe some of them hadn't been thinking about it in these terms. But I feel like inviting them to think about it in these terms allows them to think about the many ways in which films from Asia can be important.
Well, on the topic of creation and programming, something you mentioned before, obviously Asianness is not a monolith. And I think when we use the term Asian American or even just Asian in America, usually we are biased towards thinking East Asia and, the countries with privilege and wealth and resources and access. So how do you actively try to combat that bias towards East Asia and try to be more inclusive of Southeast Asia or less privileged and accessible countries?
Yeah, it's you just have to do more work because the East Asian films will fall into your laps because they play a lot of the major film festivals and their sales agents are reminding me that hey, watch this movie. Whereas a lot of these films from Southeast Asia, from South Asia, from the Pacific Islands, they may not be represented by the major sales agents. And these are sales agents with a lot of who have people on the staff and their jobs are to get their movies into film festivals. And so, for instance, like an example of a film that we're playing this year is a Malaysian film called Ma, I Love You. And it's a movie that I had to do the research of, like, what are some of the hits in Malaysia this year? What are some critically acclaimed films in Malaysia? And I'm searching reviews. I'm looking at both like professional reviews, audience reviews. I'm looking at who the directors are. And it was actually it was not that easy to find like email addresses for some of these films from Southeast Asia that maybe are not well represented. I mean, like, people don't realize, like a lot of festival organizers, we all subscribe to a platform called Senando that it's sort of like the Rolodex of sales agents.
This is the first time I've ever heard of it.
Yeah, right. These are like the kind of trade secrets that people don't. They're not really secrets. I mean, I'm not hiding anything here. It's just, I mean, we pay for this service, and it's a way in which we can like search a name of a film that recently played, I don't know, like the Berlin Film Festival, and it'll tell us who has the rights to it. But of course, this is limited to the sales agents who are also on this platform and who have invested in getting their movies known on this platform. And a lot of times it's, the filmmakers from Southeast Asia, from the Pacific Islands, from South Asia, that are not as well-resourced to be able to participate in these international film festivals and to get on these platforms that are basically centered in Europe. And so, yeah, like I said, that just means we have to do extra work for them. I did way more work for Malaysia this year than I did for like Japan. The Japanese films will fall in my lap.
Okay. Okay, I'm asking too many questions. Let me get to this year's festival, which is what you're here to promote and what this podcast is actually about. So let's start with, like, what are some of the highlights that from this year's festival? I mean, I know they're all your babies and, you know, it's like killing your darlings, but like, what are a few that you would specifically want to, you know, emphasize, whether they're, you know, marginalized or underrepresented or whatever?
Well, I have one of my the screenings I'm most excited about is, in fact, I think I had this is one of the first ideas I had for the festival before we even watched that many films. But when I was introduced to it, I knew immediately that this had to happen. And it's one of our classics, and it's a film called The Oath of the Sword. This is the oldest known film by an Asian American production company. It was recently rediscovered by a historian named Denise Kaur at Northeastern University. And she found it in an archive, and this year it played for the first time in a century.
Wow.
It was unknown except to people like Denise who are like deep in archival research, and like she saw an ad for this so she knew about the existence of this, like from magazines from the 1910s. And I saw the film and I'm just shocked because it's sort of like at that time we think that nothing is possible, right? I think in 1914 the only representations we know of Asians in the United States are just grossly stereotypical, like dragon ladies and Fu Manchu type characters. And to see a film that's sort of freed from all of that. It's a film that's about this guy from Japan, and he goes to study at UC Berkeley, and like he becomes a star athlete. And it's not about racism. It's not about threats. It's just a hardcore romantic melodrama that's scandalous in 30 minutes. And it's just like, it's so liberating to know that from the very beginning, this was possible too. And so we're playing that film with live musical accompaniments.
Oh, wow.
And we're going to have a discussion with Denise Kaur, the historian, after the film.
Well, hold on a second. So my question about that film is it actually good, or is it just good for historical value?
It is gripping. That's different than good. I mean, good is so subjective.
I mean, standards have changed in 100 years.
Yeah, but I was at the premiere in LA when this was like the first time it was shown in like a century, and you could feel it in the audience. By the end, people are like gasping. They're like, what is happening? And not because they don't know how to make a movie, but because like this is high melodrama of the silent period. Okay. And for that, like, we were all with it. And
it's an Asian cast and creatives.
So interestingly, the director is credited as Frank Shaw, spelled SHAW,
which is always an ambiguous name. Yeah.
It's ambiguous. I mean, it could be like the Shaw Brothers, right? But we know that the production company is Japanese American because, and we have records of the existence of that company being associated with Japanese Americans. We don't know who Frank Shaw is. We don't. I mean, it could be an Asian person who's pretending to be a non-Asian person to help this movie or something. Yeah. It could also be a white person that they hired. Who knows? But we do know that the production company that initiated that has their name stamped on the film is indeed Japanese American.
And the cast is major Asian.
Yeah, it's majority. Like the main characters are Japanese. There are white characters in it too. Like when he comes to America and he meets people.
And it's silent, so they don't have to speak English in an awkward way. It's just
Right. There's no dealing with accents and the people know the right languages, and there's no yellow face. It's just that's actors as they are.
Well, that's great. Yeah, it's the first time I ever heard of it. And what's another film that you wanted to spotlight?
Yeah. Well, I mean, speaking of the master section, the director Wang Bing is just the documentarian from China.
Yeah.
This is Youth Spring. Yeah. This is the first of a trilogy that he's announced, and I mean, we've played a bunch of his films before, and they're all quite different. And this one is following young people in a factory in China, and they've kind of they've moved from their hometowns to this city that specializes in children's garments. And it's actually just totally refreshing and highly watchable for 3.5 hours because you're just watching young people be young people. They're in the factory. They're not toiling away as like indentured labor. They're just they're flirting. They're smoking. They're listening to music. And so there's certain kind of energy to it that is a little bit unexpected. At the same time, they are very conscious of the fact that how much am I getting paid? How good is this job to me exactly? What latitude do I have to actually live the kind of life that I want to live? And just the way that Wang Bing like this unfolds in his hands is so miraculous. It's yet another kind of great masterpiece by Wang Bing.
Yeah. Is The Man in Black in the selection this year?
So what I've been told is that film is they're really targeting art galleries.
Okay.
So from here on out, they're really going to be thinking about how to get.
I saw that one and I was really amazed by it. I was gobsmacked. But I didn't see Youth because the runtime is always very daunting for a Wang Bing movie like that. I'm curious about films that are that challenging or avant-garde. How is the audience turnout, or is it actually better than I would expect?
It's better than you would expect. And part of it is I think there's some audiences who, that the longer the movie, the more that they're like, well, I have to watch this then. Like we showed Wang Bing's film Dead Souls. How long was that one? Was that 8 hours?
Yeah, it's really, really long.
Yeah, we played that one, and he actually came to our festival. We didn't do a post-film Q&A just because I feel like the audience would be too tired, but we did a pre-film Q&A. It wasn't that long, and there were no spoilers, obviously, but it was really great to have the opportunity. But I think there's some audiences who realize, all right, a film of this length, this is going to be a different kind of experience. At least for me, when I watch a movie that long, I think my body and my brain knows just to let go of my expectations of what a standard film journey should be. I'm not going to expect the certain kinds of beats as they screenwriting professors command you to do. That this could just be very, very open. We used to play Lav Diaz movies every year. Lav Diaz, the filmmaker from the Philippines who makes movies that are routinely 4 hours plus. We've played movies of his that are over 5 hours. And when you're watching these movies, you just let go of the expectation of what time means in a movie. And when you do that, it goes by really fast, or faster than you would think. And it takes you to a different kind of level of experience and being there. And so, yeah, there are audiences who I think it's taken a while for us to develop that audience. I mean, that's also the thing that we hope to do. If we played one Lav Diaz movie, we should play the next one. We should keep playing them so that our audiences can become familiar with people who have really who are actively exploring different ways of making movies. Because if you play one Wang Bing movie, people might just give up on it and they're like, all right, well, I think I know what that is and I'm done. But if you keep coming back to it year after year, they'll start picking up, all right, well, maybe this is how I'm supposed to watch this movie. The next time I watch it, and then after that. And it becomes not just easier, because that makes it seem like there's some films that are kind of like different levels, but sort of like this can be normal too.
Okay. Well, let me actually get to Hong Kong films, because this is the Hong Kong on Screen podcast. I've used too much of this for my selfish time. So this year we have 3 Hong Kong films in your official selection. We have Mad Fate by So Chiang. We have Elegies, the new documentary by Anne Ho, which I haven't seen. And then we have Farewell My Concubine in the classics section. So what can you say about these films, and why'd you select them, and what makes them special?
Yeah, I mean, Mad Fate, this movie is wild. It's rather unhinged, both in terms of, I mean, stylistically, it's very controlled too. Like, this is a filmmaker who kind of knows lighting, knows like the sort of the energy of the camera. It reminds me of, I mean, I'm not the only person who says this, but like, it reminds me of a certain kind of like the golden age of Hong Kong action of the 90s, even to the early 2000s.
It's a very Milky Way movie, which Milky Way being Johnny To's production company.
Yeah, and it is produced by them. And I mean, these days, back in the day, we were so lucky when like you get like 4 Milky Way movies a year.
Yeah, I know.
And now it's rare. And so when you see that logo come up on the screen, part of it is also that, like, a sense of familiarity, recognition, and wanting to relive a certain kind of Hong Kong cinema magic. So I for me, watching it, a lot of it was that. But it's also it's not pure nostalgia. I mean, this is not a feel good movie. It's this is a filmmaker who is pushing buttons, and not necessarily in terms of censorship, but you do get the sense of like moral questions that are that this filmmaker is daring us to ask. So to me, like, it makes perfect sense as a kind of a festival film.
Has SDAFF programmed a lot of the other Milky Way and Johnny To films in the past? Is there like a history?
Yeah, I mean, there was before I was involved in 2011, not so much.
Oh, really?
But then after I became involved,
because that's like his prime before 2011.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like, after that, after I became involved, it became kind of a joke that not only there's no San Diego Asian Film Festival if there are not 2 Johnny To movies.
Yeah, because he has 2 movies
and there was a great
every
run.
year. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember, like, and they were all just the great, like, Drug War, Romancing in Thin Air. One of my favorites is like Don't Go Breaking My Heart, which is just the romantic comedy. But
this might be to your surprise, but those films, especially like Romancing in Thin Air and Don't Go Breaking My Heart, like that, I guess, late period Johnny To, especially the rom-coms, are much more popular among Asian Americans than the actual local Hong Kong audience. Because a lot of the local Hong Kong audience are just like he's done this before, this is just like mass entertainment, it's not like a masterpiece or whatever. But I think the Asian American film community, especially the critics, because I think they give a chance to every Johnny To movie because of the auteurship. So I feel like they find a lot more in those movies than the local Hong Kong audience did.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that, because we're seeing them out of context, right? But I do see, like, a film like Romancing in Thin Air. There's something about it that is also it feels like it doesn't quite belong to the market, even though it's so very much about like stardom. But he seems to be like, it seems to be hyper aware, self-aware in a way that maybe his earlier films weren't. Although maybe that's not true either. His earlier films, like, you just feel like he's outsmarting the genre from the very beginning. Like Love on a Diet, or like Fat Choice Spirits, and these movies that, like, they're mainstream movies, but they seem to have a sense of the craft in a way that's different than the rest. Anyways, I can go on talking about Johnny To.
Yeah, me too. I need to stop. Okay. So let's go to Elegies by Anne Ho, which I'm actually seeing in 2 days. I'm very excited. So yeah, I know about this project, but I have no idea what the form is like. It was kind of like shot in secrecy? I mean, not really, but like a lot of Hong Kong films are never announced in the press like American productions are. So I'm curious, like, what it's like and how do you recommend it?
Yeah, I mean, if anybody who's interested in Hong Kong history, Hong Kong culture, what does it mean to have a Hong Kong voice? Like, this movie is essential. I mean, first of all, like, it's a reminder that Anne Hui has a background in documentary, in like
and
in
literature.
nonfiction.
She studied, I think,
And yeah, right.
English, maybe some literature in college. Yeah.
Yeah, and she said that she's always been interested in poetry, and has always wanted to do something like this. But a film like this, a film about poetry in Hong Kong, is not exactly a box office guarantor. And so my read on it is this feels like a COVID project. That when everything shut down, it's sort of like, let's just make something small that I've always wanted to make, that only requires me to visit a few people who are important and interview them. So it is for Anne Hui, like recently, her recent films have been big films set in China, like epic films. This is really like back to the basics of let's just sit and talk. And we find is that even though this is about poetry in Hong Kong, it's not only set in Hong Kong. Like, part of it is set in southern China, part of it is set in Taiwan. And thinking about in terms of what is the fate of Hong Kong poetry, what is the fate of Hong Kong self-representation? Does it exist in Hong Kong only? And I mean, there is a hole in the middle of this movie that is, I think, intentional, which is what's happening in Hong Kong today, the politics. And the film doesn't address any of this, but it is clearly there. And in fact, if anything, that's a very poetic move of Anne Hui to leave that unsaid. And we as the audience sort of fill that in ourselves. And it's and thinking about it that way, there's something elegiac about the Hong Kong character as being represented in this film.
Even among Hong Kongers, Hong Kong poetry is a very, very niche topic. I think especially because a lot of Hong Kongers just don't have interest in literature. They're too busy to have any interest in literature. But I do think Anne Hui is in a phase of her career where her name alone will attract a lot of attention, at least in Hong Kong, especially like after her documentary Keep Rolling. I feel like she's kind of gotten to her legend phase where people will check out what she does. I hope I'm not jinxing it, but that's what I feel.
Well, it's certainly taken long enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think people have just kind of not really connected with her that much because, she's like, she's quite art house, I think, for Hong Kong, especially because Hong Kong is mostly about genre cinema. But yeah, I hope it does well, this Elegies documentary. And then finally we have Farewell My Concubine, the restoration, which has already played North American theaters and a lot of theaters worldwide. So what makes you still want to get this film to show at SDAFF?
Well, it hasn't played San Diego theaters.
Oh, I
so
didn't know
for
that.
one,
Okay.
we still have audiences who are excited to see it, but that's the other thing. Like, the San Diego market is different than the LA, San Francisco, New York markets. We don't get everything, and so what we do as a film festival is we're kind of also filling in those holes. So it's still a San Diego premiere. I mean, it's a Leslie Chung remembrance year. We actually our spring showcase this year. Yeah, we actually did a celebration of Leslie at our spring showcase. It was Leslie and Anita Mui. And we wanted to show Farewell My Concubine as part of that program. And we were in long discussions with the rights holders. They didn't tell me the reason was because they were going to do this big splash at the Toronto International Film Festival for the 30th anniversary. And now I get it. But now I'm like, all right, well, I still want to show it. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about how this is the first time that it's been shown uncut in the United States. No thanks to Harvey Weinstein and what how they handled the film when it first came out in the 90s. And I could just say from the ticket sales that the interest is definitely still there. And And yeah, it's not too late for us to show this movie.
Yeah. Well, let me do a shameless self plug and say that the Hong Kong on Screen podcast has done a 4-part series talking about the importance of this film. Yeah, great film. So I'm wondering, in general, well, you said you used to program a lot of Johnny To, but obviously we know that recently Hong Kong cinema has been, I don't want to use the word struggling because I don't want people to feel like it's like not going well. I feel like it's not a healthy market condition, but at the same time, a lot of indie filmmakers are actually thriving, especially last year where we kind of had a miraculous box office year in Hong Kong. So I don't want to paint a totally negative picture, but yes, Hong Kong cinema is not doing the greatest because of social political reasons and COVID as well. So I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on the scene of Hong Kong cinema, and what's the relationship between SDAFF and Hong Kong cinema? Because I feel like you can program, I wouldn't say you can program more, but I feel like, you know, I would want to see more Hong Kong cinema maybe next year, or I haven't checked your archives, but I'm wondering if there used to be more Hong Kong cinema.
Yeah, actually, I kind of want to just check this real quick. I want to check our numbers from last year, because we had a lot last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, last year Hong Kong really had a sudden springtime miraculous box office boom with movies like Table for Six and A Guilty Conscience, which was actually released this January, that just suddenly broke box office records in Hong Kong. And I feel like no one can still really explain why that happened. Like, a lot of people are just like, oh, it's COVID, people are staying at home. But like, to me, it still feels kind of miraculous to me. And an indie film has also been doing, I think artistically, has been forming a new generation of voices. So yeah.
Yeah, so so last year we played a lot. We had 5 features.
I actually
5
do remember
new features from Hong Kong last year.
Now that you talk about it, yes, yeah.
And the 7 if you include the older films that we showed. And it ranges from very like mainstream kind of films like Detective versus Sleuths and Mama's Affair with pop stars in it, but also we played Blue Island, we played The Narrow Road.
Yeah.
We played Septet, The Story of Hong Kong.
Yeah. So Narrow Road is like a movie I would categorize as like part of the Hong Kong indie boom that's kind of happening. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's one that is, well, Narrow Road, I mean, the director, I believe, now lives in the UK. This what does it mean to be an indie filmmaker in Hong Kong? Does that mean you are, like, what are you independent from, right? And that's a very loaded question in a Hong Kong context. The notion of independent filmmaking requires us to have a non-independent filmmaking, right? And so is in Hong Kong, is non-independent, does that mean purely box office? Does that mean you are in cahoots with power, right? So does independence mean cultural independence, political independence? Does it mean economic independence? And no film necessarily has to check off all those boxes. You can, but yeah, it's exciting to see. Like, I mean, it's not exciting that filmmakers have to go through any of this, but I've never underestimated the tenacity of Hong Kong filmmakers to, in the face of new challenges, just to redefine their passions and redefine their priorities. And maybe in some ways that's what's happening, right? Like there's a newfound sense of purpose, and whether that is like a film like Table for Six, like the purpose is let's just laugh in Cantonese, right? Because even that seems like it is. Yeah. It is not to be taken for granted, and so I think that there's that happening too, and folks realizing that these are movies that don't need to do well in any other market than Hong Kong, and we are here to support it because, and yeah, on the surface, there's nothing political about these movies in terms of their narrative and their like explicit content, but the fact that we are supporting, I think. That remains meaningful.
For a non-Hong Konger, you have a great grasp of the Hong Kong cultural and filmmaking scene. So what do you think about like the quality of recent Hong Kong cinema output? Do you think it's a big difference from the past, or do you want to dispel this myth that Hong Kong cinema is dying?
Well, it's definitely not dying. It just transforms. All right. I mean, like, I'm certainly not going to make the case as some might. I mean, like, there was that idea that all of Hong Kong's quote-unquote best filmmakers are going to China.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of how we were talking about it 5 years ago. But frankly, the movies that they're making in China are not good movies. Right? Like, right? Like I'm not that interested in watching what
Yeah.
Choi Ark is making in China, right? I mean, except for maybe Johnny To and An Hui, like they're still making interesting, and even Stephen Chow to some extent, are making kind of interesting-ish movies. But other ones are just like they're just being plugged into a certain kind of propaganda machine, and it's like I'm not like I'm not hoping for them to come back necessarily. Like I've moved on from them. So I'm not necessarily nostalgic in that sense for Hong Kong. I if anything, I'm just excited about how filmmakers will continue to innovate, and think in terms of like with a film like Narrow Road, which is not explicitly political, but I feel a certain cause in it. When I see the empty streets in Hong Kong, that's depicted in this film, I can't also think about the inverse, which is that these streets were packed not too long before the film was shot, and so sometimes we think about the strategic absences in these movies, and sometimes they're here to have us ask these kinds of questions.
Yeah.
And of course, a movie like Blue Island, which is just blows my mind in terms of how like you can creatively think about the history of this place, its politics, and it cross generationally. Yeah, so there's a lot of excitement, and also we haven't even talked about short films, documentaries.
How is that
experimental
films from
films?
Hong Kong? Because even I don't know. I feel like Hong Kong audience don't have exposure to that.
Right. Well, I mean, some years are better than others, but what's great is like it is not squashed, right? And maybe because these films are a little bit more under the radar, there's a lot more chance taking, and maybe it's in these areas where we're really going to see what is possible. And also like and this might be just me speaking as a kind of a person living in the United States, but I'm interested in the Hong Kong diaspora. I'm interested in like Hong Kong filmmakers who are maybe they're studying overseas, maybe they have decided to move overseas, but they're still their heart is still with Hong Kong. And how are they going to continue to tell that story from a remove? So in some ways, they're going to be insider outsiders. They're Hong Kong filmmakers in exile, which like throughout film history, we've seen examples of this, not just from Hong Kong, but from other countries. And it's led to really important statements about the state of our world. And so I'm also, I don't see the Hong Kong diaspora as a kind of quote unquote like less Hong Kong of a space or like it is just, this is new ways of thinking about Hong Kong, and by necessity as well. And we hope that film festivals like ours becomes a home also to the Hong Kong diaspora.
Yeah, I think new movies, whether it's features or shorts, will be coming from the diaspora pretty soon. Like as soon as like next year, this year. So that's something to look forward to, I guess, to try to take some silver lining out of the political situation. And my question, I guess another question about Hong Kong for you is, what do you wish to see more from Hong Kong cinema, if there is anything that you do wish to see more?
I mean, I just like seeing more, right? Last year was such like last year realizing like, wow, to be able to see so much, we cannot take any of this for granted, right? Like that there is this much at all is powerful, whether we like these movies or not. I mean, I honestly, like as a I don't speak Cantonese. Some of these recent blockbuster Cantonese comedies go over my head. They don't work as well in subtitles, and I wish I could do more for these movies. But like even if they don't make me laugh, like I'm so excited that these movies exist and that they're making so much money, that they're making people laugh. And so I guess it's I just more and more variety, like that's what I want to see.
Yeah, I think everyone is trying back home. Yeah, it's just a lot of production factors, even just beyond censorship, are very much limiting production. But I think there is definitely a new generation of voices rising, especially because Johnny To has basically retired, and then you have other masters from that generation like her like slowing down. Like finally, like they were so good and they had such a dominance of the market for like 30 to 40 years that they're slowing down, and then I think the gap is actually less immediate as I thought it would be. I think there are some very exciting new voices coming from Hong Kong. it's a struggle, but it'll be fine. And I think, yeah, I wish, my hope is for festivals like SDAFF, especially with a niche interest like yours, can you continue to give that spotlight? Because, Hong Kongers, when we hear that, oh, this film has played in some festival, it's like there is some kind of prestige,
Well, we're happy to give these filmmakers a little extra boost. If that's all we do, that's worth it to me.
Okay, before I let you go, let me go back to like in general about the SDAFF. I'm curious, like for young filmmakers like me or just people listening, what are you looking for from them, and like what are some kind of do's and don'ts that you would advise that you would give them for submissions or just filmmaking in general?
I mean, the generic thing that we say, that other festivals say, is just show us something we've never seen before.
I think it's very hard, like to be original.
That's kind of a trick thing to say because we see so much. And I mean, we play things that are like, that's not that original. I mean, we want something that feels fresh. The problem is you don't know what our cliches are because you don't have to watch all the same movies. But like, for instance, like there's certain Asian American films that like, oh, we've seen that story before, right? Like how many more stories about like
that way very much in film school.
Right. Yeah, it's like Asian American filmmakers love make movies about, oh, my mom won't let me date a white person or something. It's like, okay, we've been making that movie since at least The Wedding Banquet, right? And it goes on and on and on. And there's a sense of like reinventing the wheel with Asian American filmmakers. From Asia though, I mean, I guess every country has its own. Like Korea has a lot of, people don't know this, like a lot of like film school students are just making wannabe Hong Sang-soo movies because they're so cheap to make. You don't need that many resources. And it's sort of like we think that the rest of the world understands these kind of movies. But I very, very rarely see a knockoff Hong Sang-soo movie that succeeds. I don't know, like in Hong Kong.
That's why there's only one Hong Sang-soo.
There's only, yeah. And he already makes enough Hong Sang-soo movies. You don't need any other.
He's not going to slow down to give you a void to fill,
Right. Well, so the question then is like, how do we move? Like maybe there's lessons to learn from him. Like how do you shoot with minimal resources, with very small teams, and shoot in a way that's very, very personal. But people don't realize like, yeah, there's a certain formula of his films, but there's a certain touch that he has that no one else seems to be able to do. There's a certain kind of magic in his movies that no one is able to replicate. So don't do it. Just find something else to do. I don't think if in Hong Kong, I don't really feel like there are cliches right now. It's sort of like, it's funny because like that was the whole like Akbar Abbas like the theory of Hong Kong cinema, which is like it's all cliches. Like that's a whole like postmodern reading of Hong Kong cinema. Like I feel like these days I don't think about Hong Kong in terms of cliches. Like there's a lot of room to do things that maybe we haven't seen before.
Oh, I was gonna talk about this, but that thought left my head, which is I think a few years ago there was a lot of Hong Kong audiences that was like about the indie films. We found them very miserable and like downtrodden, and just like all of these people are struggling, because those are like some of the cheapest films to make. Drama is about like lower class people who are struggling, and I think for a long time people were like, this is miserablist, like it's like Ken Loach kind of kitchen sink kind of cinema, and we don't need more of it.
Yeah.
And actually I do think like the table for six phenomenon is kind of a response to that. But anyway, but I feel like nowadays people don't complain anymore, because any Hong Kong cinema, especially of that indie variety about lower class people struggling in the city, is like kind of a miracle in terms of resources and censorship. So I feel like that's not really a complaint anymore. But I do feel like that was a cliche a few years ago. I don't know if you feel that way or not.
Well, certainly, I mean, that's prevalent throughout Asian cinema, like a certain kind of like Asian art cinema. I mean, like in China, for instance, right? Like there's a whole, seems like a cliche of like films about poverty, about migrant workers, and so on and so forth. And yeah, I mean, like a lot of people have found that to be a formula, like a winning formula. But it's hard to do those movies well, and when you've seen a film that does it well, it really stands out, and then we're interested in playing those movies. But you're right. I think in Hong Kong, I don't see that many miserable Hong Kong movies. there are fewer miserable Hong Kong movies than like Hong Kong horror movies that I watch. But I think that's also a sense of like, does the rest of the world see us purely in terms of our suffering and as allegories of the trials and tribulations of a post-colonial or quote unquote third world country or something, right? Like, and that's so there's a cliche / formula for success there. And honestly, I when I see a lot of the Asian films that play festivals in Europe, that is indeed the case. Less so with the American festivals. I feel like American festivals have maybe a lower pain tolerance when it comes to like watching like a lot of miserable films from Asia. But when I watch films that play Busan, for instance, there's a lot of miserable Asian stuff that gets played in there, including from like South Asia. And Korean cinema actually has a lot of very, very like like films of despair. That's actually a cliche of Korean cinema to me. Yeah, luckily I don't feel that way for Hong Kong just yet. And
okay, great. Yeah. That's great to hear. Yeah. I think the variety is coming back up, like from the movies that I've heard of that will be coming out soon. There are still some of the, struggling lower class kind, but there's also a lot more kind of urban, city topics that I think might be interesting. Yeah. So, well, before we end, is there anything that you want to mention to the audiences that I haven't mentioned?
Well, I mean, I think that's part of not taking Hong Kong cinema for granted is not expecting that it's going to be coming to your streaming service soon. That it takes a little bit of work to find these movies. And when they play film festivals, when they play in theaters, however miraculously, that it's a little extra effort to seek them out. And in Hong Kong on screen, like your own programs are to be commended for this too, including your virtual programming. That it's not going to be on Netflix. Like you have to actually go out and watch these movies and learn about them. And then they're not automatically going to fill in your social media feeds in terms of conversation around them. You might have to be the one to start that conversation. And so, we can't take this for granted. We're all building it together, whether we are audience members, filmmakers, or film festival programmers.
And how big is the SDFF audience usually? Like, are we talking about hundreds? Like, is it an AMC kind of situation, or is it like a film center?
Oh, yeah. We are this year. We're primarily at a Regal Edwards Cinema. So these are 180 seat auditoriums.
Nice.
Which for a lot of these films is more than enough. Like it's, but some films are, like they're selling fast. So yeah.
And do you does the festival make the most money from ticket sales or sponsorships or submissions or?
I mean, it's primarily through grants and sponsorships. I mean, I think we recognize that if these movies could make money from ticket sales, they would just play at AMC.
Right.
Like
exactly.
Right. Like these are films that require a different kind of investment, and it's investment by a nonprofit organization like ours, an organization that has a mission and where we have experts coming out to bring value to these movies where people may not recognize that have that value otherwise.
Okay. Well, thank you, Brian, for this very extensive discussion of all things SDAFF and Hong Kong cinema and indie cinema. And I hope everyone has enjoyed this episode and learned more about the film festival scene, especially in relation to Hong Kong cinema. Thank you.
Thank you.